Okay, so here we are at the final video for the creation of the ladder asset. There's only a few things left that we need to do. First, it would be nice if Steve added in some sort of toggle into the asset that will allow an artist to toggle off the diving board and the main support pole. Let's think about this. Steve has gone through all of the pain of creating a network that generates a very nice ladder. So what if in the future you're working on a project that calls for just a ladder? Well, if we can't hide out the diving board and the pole, then this really is not a very useful asset for that particular project. But if we can turn off the diving board and the main support pole, this becomes a very useful asset for other projects that may call for a ladder. So we're going to get that set up. Also, we need to set up a custom parameter that will allow us to specify a floor object for our ladder, just as we did with our stage and the pool. And we'll simply borrow the X form from the stage or the pool that has the expression already on it, just as you guys saw us do with the pool, and we'll use it here. So that'll only take a second to get set up. Finally, we're going to create some shaders. We're not going to go through the trouble of putting together some custom shaders. We'll be revisiting custom shaders coming up real soon. As a matter of fact, we're going to be visiting some more complex custom shaders very soon when we start working with our crowds. But for now, we're just going to use some Vex Super materials because all we need is some basic colors that have a lighting model that takes into account specularity and all. And we'll come up with some basic colors, get them applied to our diving board, our ladder, and our main pole, and that will pretty much wrap up the video. Cool. So, Steve, let's go ahead and get started first with the toggle that allows us to hide out the diving board and the main support poles.
Sweet. So I'm going to hide out our parameters.
Okay.
And I'm going to bring up the type properties for our ladder asset. So right-click, come down to type properties, that is off the bottom of the capture region. And I'm going to create a new toggle parameter that I'm going to call create board toggle with the label create board. And as well as having this guy toggle between having our board and not having our board, I want it to also toggle the activation of our parameters that relate to the board, so that when we uncheck creating a board, we can no longer access the parameters that...
And it just makes sense. It's logical.
So we need to do some reordering of parameters to do that. The pole radius, board length, board width, and board bend strength, all four of these relate to the diving board. So let's just drag those down underneath create board, not out of the folder, thank you. And I'm going to set their disable when to be set to create board toggle is equal to 0. So when we turn off create board toggle, this guy will get disabled. I'll copy that, and let's just paste that in for all four of these guys. So with that, I'm going to click accept. And if we bring up our parameters, we have the create board toggle, which if we turn off, we lose access to those parameters.
All right. Well, while we're rearranging, parameters, how about we rearrange some of the remaining parameters just so that, we put the parameters with the highest priority.
Yeah, because number of rungs probably is more important than the radius for our little spheres on the end.
I would think so,
I'll probably boost him up underneath height and then call it for rearranging parameters.
Okay.
So I'm going to right click on our asset, come down to type properties, grab number of rungs and just drag that up underneath height.
So that gives you height, number of rungs.
Then our ladder width.
Yeah, so all the ladder stuff.
The radius, I'll probably put the offset underneath radius, just being picky.
Yeah.
Then sphere, and then all our board related parameters.
Okay.
Cool. So accept. So let's now set up the switch that's going to allow us to turn on and off the board, and that's going to be easy because we've got these two different merges. The merge for just our ladder and the merge that has our ladder and our board. So if we switch between these two based on that toggle, we're going to be able to turn on and off the board. So I'm going to branch off of merge ladder by middle clicking on the output, and I'm going to create a switch and then enter. And let's rename this guy to switch no board underscore board. And I'm going to wire merge all in as the second input. If we bring our visibility down, that means when our select input is 0, and if you recall, when our toggle is off, that's going to be 0. We don't get the diving board. When we turn on the toggle, we'll get a value of 1, which if we drive this parameter with a value of 1, we get the board. So we can simply reference our toggle as our select input parameter. So that was the create board TGL. Fantastic. So now if I bring up the parameters for our ladder, If we uncheck create board, we lose our board. If we check create board, we get our diving board.
Very nice.
Cool, so I'm going to add the parameter for specifying our floor object. So I'm going to right click on our ladder, come down to type properties. I'm going to create a separator just to keep things nice and clean, and then an operator path. Operator path needs to be set with the exact same names as we've used previously. So that's going to be floor, capital O, BJ.
And the reason is, once we grab that X form that's in another network, we're not going to change any of the expressions. Expressions are referencing everything relatively, and it's looking for a floor OBJ name.
Exactly. And our op filter I'm going to set to object geometry only as before. So we can accept that. I'm now going to jump up a level to see our ladder asset, up a level to see the object, and then jump inside the stage asset, and we've got our sit on floor obj underscore x form. I'm going to Control C to copy that, bring up the history by clicking on the down arrow at the side of our path gadget, and I'm going to jump down to our /obj/ladder, which is going to take us inside our ladder asset. I'm going to paste this transform and wire our switch into the transform. Now if I bring up the parameters for our asset, we can specify a floor object.
Keep an eye on the ladder. Let's make sure it moves.
And also we're going to talk about exporting a relative path as well. Let's set the stage and let's make sure that we uncheck export relative path, because we want to make sure that the
path that's in there is an absolute,
because when it gets evaluated here, if we specify a relative path relative to our asset, that relative path is different when we're down inside our network. So if we evaluate that relative path, it's going to be incorrect. Giving an absolute path avoids any of these issues, and so everything will work nicely. So we should see our ladder jump up to sit on the stage.
Nice.
Fantastic. And we can close out that and bring up show all objects. It's in the pool.
It is. And the poor ball's up underneath.
Yeah. But it is sitting on our stage.
Yeah, on the
fantastic. Stage. So I'm going to hide out the other objects. So all that's left now is to set up some really simple shaders. So I'm going to create a shop net so that we can create our shaders within our asset. I'm going to rename this to ladder shop and push enter to jump down inside. And we're just going to create some simple Vex super materials. The first I'm going to call M underscore probably dive board material. No, dive board pole. And this is going to be for the pole of our dive board. I'm going to choose a Blinn shading model, since Blinn is better suited towards a metal type material. And let's give it a diffuse color of kind of like almost like a very dark brown, browny yellow. So kind of like a dark brass color, sort of like an off brown.
Yeah, looks good.
And I'm going to grab a specular color that is similar to a diffuse color, because metals generally have a specular color that is tinted towards the color of the diffuse, whereas other surfaces would have, like plastic actually has a white specular color but a colored diffuse. So if we copy our diffuse parameter and just paste the values in for our specular, and then we can desaturate and darken that up a little for our specular color. And I'll probably boost diffuse rough just slightly. These are very approximate values that I'm putting in. I'm not spending time testing and rendering. We're going to promote some of these up to our asset anyway, and you guys feel free to go in and tweak these values to get exactly the look that you're after. So we've got a basic shader for our dive board pole. I'm going to Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and rename this to M underscore ladder, and use this guy to create a brighter brass material for all of our ladder. So I'm going to grab our diffuse, boost this closer to yellow, more like a golden yellow color, and the specular color again closer to a golden sort of yellow color.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to set up for that shader. I'm going to create one final Vex super material, which I'm going to name M underscore dive board. This is going to be used for the board itself. And let's go with a diffuse color of a very pale sort of tan color, something around.
Okay. Maybe shift it a little bit more grayish.
As in desaturate
Yeah,
more?
let's go and desaturate a little bit. Yeah, right in there.
Okay, cool. And I'll leave a specular color grayscale, but I will bring the specular down an extreme amount because we want this to be a matte material. It makes sense for the diving board to not be a shiny material because if the diving board was shiny, we'd think that it would be maybe slippery, and that's just impractical for a diving board. So I'm going to bring the specularity right down. I'm also going to bring the specular rough up quite significantly, and the diffuse rough just a little bit, just to give some scattering. So we've got 3 very basic shaders. I'll get these assigned to the various components of our geometry, and then I'll deal with promoting up just a few of the basic parameters from these guys up to our asset.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump up a level, or 2, jump back inside, up to our SOP level, and let's create some material SOPs. So for our pole, we can wire directly off of the sweep into a material SOP. And select inside our ladder shop, our m_diveboard pole, making sure we're using a relative path. Fantastic. For our diving board itself, we can wire directly off of the box. So right click, left click on material from our history to wire in a new material, and grab our m_diveboard, again exporting a relative path. And for our ladder, I'm going to find our merge ladder when we've got all of the ladder created together. I'm going to wire that into a material SOP and grab our m_ladder exporting a relative path. If we bring our visibility down to the bottom of our network. Cool. So I do want to just promote just a couple of the parameters. We've all seen how to promote shader parameters up, and I'm not going to spend too long promoting them up just because we didn't spend too long creating the shaders in the first place. But I am going to bring up the type properties for our asset, create a shaders folder. And let's just promote up a few of the basic parameters. So I'm going to jump inside our shop network. For the diving board, let's promote up just the diffuse color, I guess. So I'm going to right click on diffuse and export parameter to dive properties. And I'll call this dive board diffuse and put that in the shaders folder. For the dive board pole, I'll export the diffuse and the specular color. So export and export. I'll call this pole diffuse and pole specular. Again, make sure they go into this shaders folder. And then finally for the ladder, again, I'll just grab the diffuse and specular just as an example of a few parameters being promoted up. So we'll call this ladder diffuse and ladder specular. Put those into our shaders folder and accept. So now if I jump up to see our asset, we have the shaders folder and we have just some of the basic parameters. So with that, we can save out our asset. So I'm going to right click and save operator type. And then I'm going to right click and match the current definition. For some reason, Houdini threw up an error. Left clicking in the network editor seemed to
lock it
solve
and make
all
everything
problems
fine.
Because it's locked as it should have done. It's appeared back in the viewport. So I don't quite know why Houdini was complaining, but everything is fine. So
okay. And
awesome.
with that, that is going to wrap up the ladder asset. So that's the stage, the ground, the character, the pool, ladder, diving board. So all that's left is
the bleachers and the audience.
Bleachers in the crowd. Excellent. All right. Good job, Steve. And with that, that concludes this video. Thanks, everyone.